Charles, thank you for joining me all the way from London. I'm going to get you to do most of the talking. Why don't you start by telling us, who are you?
Good morning, James. Delighted to be here with you and with Merchant Spring. So I'm Charles Tellier, CEO of D2E Labs. I started my career in investment banking a while ago, working for US banks in their consumer, retail, and e-commerce practices. I'm also a corporate executive. I run strategy M&A at one of the largest European grocers, and I'm also an entrepreneur. I know what it takes to start a business from scratch. And we launched D2E Labs 2 years ago when my co-founders had just launched Unibrands, one of the largest FB aggregators. And in that position, the team saw the extreme fragmentation in the service delivery space. And I realized the merits of consolidation in the marketplace service space. And in that context, we raised capital. We acquired our first platform called Market Defense a year ago as a segue for this consolidation strategy.
Get it. Okay. Now, obviously, we're going to get into the nitty gritty about, selling an agency and all that kind of stuff. But why don't you tell us more about what is D2E Labs?
Sure. So D2E Labs is a marketplace services consolidation platform. Our goal is to consolidate service provider that serve brands across marketplaces and across geographies. We do not prioritize tech content. In that field, we differ a little bit from other consolidation platforms that we've seen, like Carbon6, Trickles, Essential. We prefer to focus on servicing models that use tech rather than sell tech. So agencies, drop shipping, any sort of business model at the intersect of those. We're based in London, but the group is present globally with the majority of our staff and activities in the US.
Interesting. So you mentioned there, you're kind of consolidating all these service providers, and I think the first time I met you, I said, you're completely mad. But why did you pick e-commerce, marketplace agencies? Like, of all the things you could pick, why that?
Well, it's a lot of nice people, I guess. No, we observe significant fragmentation in pricing, scope of service, and generally range of clients that are addressed through the agency universe. So, and it's also a function where you see a lot of entrepreneurial stories and often associated with a founder that has a background in some element of the e-commerce or Amazon ecosystem. So we thought it was a very interesting area where to conceptualize and execute a consolidation play. We find that the service model for clients on Amazon and other marketplaces varies a lot also from one vertical to another. If you take the average order value, the cost of logistics, the bulkiness of item, the 1P versus 3P, the brand power, the control that is required, the geographic elements, there is a lot of variety, diversification in service that are provided. And we see the desire to have a lot of those under the same roof, if I may say. So we want to create that one go-to platform under the same roof for services, for brands across verticals, functionalities, and geographies.
Get it. Okay. So that's the theory, right? But why don't you tell us about, cutting through all the theory? Tell us about a real life acquisition.
Sure.
You mentioned
Of course.
Valuations, but how are they doing now?
I'll give you an illustration. So we acquired Market Defense a little bit more than a year ago, based in Seattle. And Market Defense is specializing in the one vertical that is the beauty space. And they developed a service and a range of functionalities that are particularly well suited for clients in that space, in terms of the functional requirements, marketing, brand control, logistics, And we think it's a very good example of what we want to achieve, a certain platform that develop a specialty with a management that love its sector and love, of course, what they do. We think, and that has the potential to go even broader than what they currently do. And that's what our platform is here to serve them for. So you are asking, what have we done? We help the company essentially go deeper internationally. We struck partnership agreements in China. We're placing footholds in Europe, UK, France. We're now launching into Mexico, Mercado Libre. So we've been pretty active and really perceive ourselves as a support base, of course, for the management and the existing team, which in the particular example is great.
Interesting. So I kind of think that's a good segue into the next question. So obviously you've helped this market defense kind of go bigger and better and all that kind of stuff, which sounds great. But why, obviously that's a reason to join you. But why? What's underneath that? Like, why would an agency founder or owner sell?
Look, it's a good question. And firstly, we've seen across a range of professional services, consolidation trajectories for the past century. It's nothing new. And usually it entails a number of parameters. Firstly, it allows obviously the entrepreneur or the founder to realize a liquidity event. Concretely, it means cashing in. And especially those days, it's never necessarily bad. There's also sometimes the feeling that the business might have reached a certain threshold, and it's an opportunity to continue develop the client portfolio within a bigger platform, and especially if the transaction structure includes a partial rollover. And such bigger platform like ours can deliver synergies, cross-selling opportunities, and be a less risky avenue for value creation for owners. So in general, why would founders sell? Well, it's an opportunity to de-risk, make money, redistribute your own net worth as a founder, and certainly get exposure to a bigger platform with a path to value creation, which is, in our view, more substantive and less risky.
Get it. Okay. Next question. You and I are seeing a lot of merger and buying and selling, like between agencies, right? Or agencies selling to bigger agencies. But why should they sell to you, Charles? Like, this is give me the sales pitch. Like, why you? Why D2E?
We're the nicest guy in the room, James. No, but like we try to be very pragmatic and adapt to the founders' objectives and desires. There has been templates that were developed, be it in the FBA roll-up space or in a certain digital marketing consolidation place, where a certain transaction structure should be a certain way and no others. We tend to be a little bit more, much more flexible than that, and provide a mix between cash upfront, earnout for exposure to the short-term development of the company, and certainly equity rollover for exposure over the longer-term value creation through the company. So it's really this desire to adapt to the founder's need. But secondly, I think, and it's the more important point longer term, we are eager to scale talent and expertise through a broader organization. And we think we have the range and the scope. Today we are in North America, Europe, Asia. We have the range and the scope to provide that exposure and reach for talent that we would have the good fortune to be partnering with. And generally speaking, we like to think we are good partners and well equipped to support the next stage of growth for founder businesses. What is clear is we would never tell any founder what to do or the way to run their business. They have achieved a successful and fantastic trajectory. We are way too realistic regarding our capabilities to challenge that. But we want to be there as a partner for the next stage of development. We provide the merit of an existing platform, of synergies and value contribution, and I think that's also a distinguishing factor versus other types of acquirer you can think of, which can be less flexible or certainly more systematic in their approach to integration.
Get it. Okay. So the translation is there, you have a great flexibility in kind of taking cash off the table, and you're there for the long run, right, to help them really scale. So
I'm disappointed I need to be translated, James.
But let's say, in all seriousness, like if I'm an agency listening to this, and I'm liking what I'm hearing, what do you like? What is it that you're really looking for to consider me as being acquired as an agency to come onto your platform?
No, of course, we look at three broad parameters when we engage with potential partners. Firstly, the service model. What is it? What do people actually do? And is it adapted to a given vertical or completely sector agnostic? Is it replicatable or extendable across a broader range? And does it involve taking inventory? So that's really what I call the big picture around the service model. The second dimension is the functionalities that are delivered, and across a variety of dimensions. What is the tech content? Does it rely on internal or external SaaS? What are the geographies covered? And what is the general footprint and the team and partners associated for that? And that's the third point, which is probably the most important one, which is what is the team? Who does what? And certainly engage with the leadership, their view about the business, what they have accomplished so far, what they wish to accomplish in the future. I think that this is a key part of the quality, really, of the discussion we have at the initial stage with the potential partners we engage with.
Get it. Okay, so just to recap, I'm not translating. Just to recap, it's like you look at service model, what actually gets delivered, and the team. If anyone's willing to take that away, it's those three things. Now, you mentioned geos there. I am curious, like which part of the world or which geographies do you see the best agencies, and why, in your opinion?
It's a very interesting question, having the good fortune of having a global footprint. I would say that rather than where are the best agencies, because there are excellent agencies anywhere. And we have discussions and engagement and dialogues and M&A executions with remarkable platforms and great portfolio of clients and talented teams, which is what I want to flag first. But in terms of the geographic element, we like to think in terms of the complexities and the of the context and what it takes to execute successfully. Like in any field of consumer goods and retail, Europe tends to be a little bit more complicated than North America. Complicated because of the regulatory environment. It's the legal framework around selective distribution, MOPs, GDPR. It's just a more complex regulatory environment. The regulation also relates to the way Amazon approaches the market, with changes regarding the stance vis-a-vis on 1P for wholesalers, etc. So it's a more complex regulatory environment. It's also more fragmented. As any consumer goods categories, you think in terms of 20 countries, languages, marketplaces. It affects the brand recognition that differs from one geography to another, and your client acquisition as well, where language and appetite for proximity drives growth in domestic platforms. So it means successful players in Europe tend to be super strong because the bar is high to execute on a successful strategy, given the sort of backdrop I just described. In the US, the universe is much deeper, with an incredible number of talented founders and teams that can either embrace the market as a whole or that focus on an attractive niche that they completely master. I would say the service model tends to be a little bit more fragmented in the US, with incredible businesses emerging from maybe narrower part of the servicing chain, given the depths of the local market. And we absolutely love the energy that we see and the passion we see and that we witness every day in the US, and that often translates in amazing stories. You have other, of course, areas, Latin America, that is growing with still high level of fragmentation. And China, which is obviously an entirely different ecosystem with a range of local players, one of which we partnered with, but with very different local dynamics. So rather than where are the best agencies, I would rather talk about what are the specs of the local market and what does it take to succeed on those.
Get it. You clearly should have been a diplomat, Charles. Zooming back in to go back to the kind of the deal and the M&A stuff, is there a good time, bad time? Anecdotally, I think everyone thinks right now the market's not great, but what's your take on timing for selling?
Yeah, there is one counterintuitive element on the timing issue, which is the best time is often when everything is good. And we hear that a lot. Everything is good, why would I sell? But well, precisely because that's when you're going to realize the best value given the ongoing environment. In general, it's a triangulation between A, the objectives of the founder, B, what is best for the business, and C, the general operating environment. So you need to factor in these three elements to come to the right conclusion.
Get it. Okay.
So does it mean is now the good moment? Not necessarily. Of course not. There is no general answer. Everyone has his own agenda, objectives, timeline in mind, and which again should reflect these three parameters.
Well, I guess it's always a good time to sell to D2E, right? So, I'm assuming a lot of people who are listening to this may not have ever done a deal or a transaction of a business. So give us the high level. How does selling actually work?
Yeah, so you just said I was a diplomat. On this one, I'm not going to be a diplomat. Everyone that tells you it's fast and easy is wrong. It's not. We tend to make it as easy and fast as possible, but an M&A process, by definition, is always an important milestone in the life of a company and in the life of a founder. The way an M&A process works is fairly well structured. There is an informal exchange driving to the signing of an NDA, which drives to a more detailed exchange of information, which itself drives to the submission of a term sheet, which, if agreed, will take roughly between 40 and 60 days to be executed and to deliver a transaction with the cash in the founder's account. So it's roughly all in from the moment we go from the initial exchange of information to the cash in the account stage. It's probably between 6 weeks and 2 months. But it is a fairly intense process, and that also depends on the level of preparation that the company went through, and where it stands in general in terms of its reporting, quality of information, availability, and so on.
Okay. I'm going to ask a bonus question now, just for the sake of the audience. Give us a little teaser as to what due diligence involves.
It's very simple. It's the review of the contracts, 1, clients, staff, and 2, the review of the financials.
Get it. Very clear. Understood.
And below those probably oversimplistic characterization, there is a bit of a ramification, but in terms of principles, it doesn't go beyond that. We tend to bring a financial advisor with us who essentially will ask financial questions and go through the financials. We tend to bring legal advisor that will help us, go through essentially the contracts. Nothing unusual or exceptional on that front, but it's a fairly straightforward process from that standpoint.
Get it. Okay. Still on the transaction stuff. So the big question is, so how much are you paying? How big is your bag of money, and what are the valuation drivers that you can share with us?
So that's where the diplomat comes back. Look, in terms of what are the valuation drivers, I think that's the key question. The first one, it's really the dynamic around the client portfolio. How big are the clients? Is the client pool growing? Are you losing? I like to think in terms of key metrics. Everyone said they have key metrics on their own. The ones we like to look at are typically the average revenue per client and the revenue churn, which give an idea of the dynamic around the revenue build-up dynamic around the platform. Then the cost base to address those clients. I mentioned the who does what before. It's really what are the cost entails to address a certain revenue pool, and those two parameters mix into a third one, which is a financial profile. And the valuation driver, well, yes, it's what sits at the bottom line at the EBITDA level. Typically, the higher the EBITDA, the higher the valuation. The next question is going to be what is the multiple here? It's so dependent really on the parameters associated really to the platform itself, its size, that it's impossible to provide a narrower range. I think that in general, it really boils down to the EBITDA profile, which may or may not be turned into seller discretionary earning, factoring in or not the compensation to the founder, to the owner. But in general, it's no different to what you see again in valuations, in consolidation trajectories, in professional services.
Yep. No, understood. So zooming out just a little bit, tell us about how agency M&A. Tell us more about agency M&A versus Amazon ecosystem SaaS M&A. Like how is it differing?
So it's a very good question. Look, in general, it's obviously a huge universe which drives appetite for bringing players together. That has been the case in FB aggregation. That has been the case in software. I think the big difference is that an FB aggregators consolidates essentially brands and inventory. A SaaS software rollup would consolidate IP. On our side, we bring together people. Those people being founders, being leadership teams, and being concretely brand managers or service managers that are involved on the day-to-day. And because we bring together people and the partnership level, the trust, the alignment across all the category of people I mentioned are paramount. And this is really at the heart of what we do. You mentioned why D2E Labs. Really, this notion of alignment and being a partner to help achieve management and the team's objectives is at the core. And I think that's probably a bit distinguishing versus other roll-up strategy. It does require a notion of alignment and trust because we are bringing together teams and talents, which is a slightly different dimension to necessarily an FBA roll-up or a SaaS roll-up.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's clear. Now, I just wanted to talk about value expansion, right? And the concept of rolling over the proceeds from the transaction. Maybe you want to explain in your mind what all that means, and how do you benefit from value expansion, and should you roll over proceeds from, like, explain what it means and then kind of answer the question.
Sure. Firstly, the priority is continuity. It's a tough job to expand and develop an agency. The last thing we want to do is to mess up with the good work that has been done by the team in place. But we do have an integration framework in place that is aimed at facilitating and supporting the development of the platform. I'll take the example of Market Defense and our first partner agency. We onboard all the financing. We mutualize the professional services. We really make sure that the cost can be pooled and shared and spread over a wider pool of clients, and that's really what we think of when we talk about integration framework. Would the entity benefit from the systems we have in place, technology, people, and would we benefit from the systems and that the acquired entity has in place? And that takes me back to the scaling of talent and systems we want to bring from the target that we acquire. So what it concretely means is that unlocking synergies, cost synergies, cross-selling opportunities, and certainly under a roof which brings together best practices and rolls them over a broader scope of revenue.
Get it. Okay. Circling back a bit, back to the money,
Yeah, we like that.
How can, if I'm an agency now, like how can I prepare to maximize my value? Like, we understand the 3 pillars you look at, but what should I do to maximize how much you're going to pay me?
Sure. I think there is 2 dimensions, a very concrete one and a more conceptual one. The very concrete one is to have files that are in place. I mentioned client contracts, financials, HR. It's basically pure, corporate sort of hygiene, if I may say. Having the right docs at the right place saves considerable time. And drive also the formulation of reliable accounting and financials. That's the very concrete part. There's a more maybe conceptual part which relates to the general involvement of the founder and the way he sees the transition. It's a bit of a paradox, but sometimes it's important for a founder to take a step back not from operations at all, but from the association between his name and the franchise, simply because you want the franchise to live and continue to flourish by itself, regardless of the actual concrete involvement of the founder, which in lots of cases we hope will remain. So I know it's a bit theoretical, but the more we can put forward the name of the company, the better in that particular context, as opposed sometimes to the attachment of a particular company with a particular founder.
No, that makes complete sense. As sometimes a company reputation is based on the founder, and I guess that's why D2E Labs is not called Charles's Labs. So
the catastrophic platform in choice anyway.
So you mentioned there about founder taking a step back from the brand, like so that the brand can stand up on its own. But then you did mention you would want a founder to kind of remain in operations. Now, let's get a little bit deeper in that. Like, so what happens if a founder wants to stay like pretty involved? What does it look like?
I think on that front, you have a very simple question, which is the founder indispensable to the business? Yes, no. And does the founder want to stay? Yes, no. And we are very open to the founder and anyone carrying the business on the to join us, and on the contrary, we want that. So obviously, if a founder is indispensable for his business or her business, it's going to be very hard not to be involved going forward, unless you craft or imagine a transition period to make sure the onboarding can be done as smoothly as possible. But in general, to the very first point, we not only welcome, we like founders that see merit in what we want to try to achieve, that want to associate themselves with that. And if there is a preference for all cash upfront exit, no problem. But if there is a desire and a common ground and matching objectives to stay involved, and certainly involving equity exposure, we very much welcome that.
Get it. All right, 2 more questions, Charles, and I know we're like really stretching the time here. So what is the deciding factor for a successful partnership? Like, we've discussed so many things, but what is like the key thing?
Yeah. No, of course. I think a degree of alignment. And what I mean by alignment, it's of course financial alignment, but strategic alignment, and really an agreement of what we're trying to achieve before the transaction and after the transaction. That's really the first point. And the second one, which is something we haven't really talked about, some element of personal fit is paramount. We would be spending time together, even if we have a working from home culture. Face-to-face matters. Working together matters. I think the trust, the integrity, the being fair and generally nice in the context of a fruitful personal and professional partnership helps and is great in general.
Yeah, it's very, very practical. Very, very much makes sense. Final question. What is the future for agencies? Are we going to see more roll-ups? Are we going to see, D2E Labs equivalents? Tell me.
I don't have a crystal ball, sadly, James. What's the future? What I see is certainly a persistence of our model because clients need us. I think the question is who owns the client at the end of the day, who has the highest perceived value added, and who develops the highest trust level with a given client. And more often than not, you realize that, hey, the person that speaks every day, with a given client is sometimes, more often than not, the one that they trust the most. And that, in my view, legitimizes the agency model 100%. And I've no doubt about that. Regarding the roll-ups, we're not a roll-up. We are a consolidation platform. I don't like the systematic notion that this term entails, but will there be more? I don't know. What I can tell you is that it's not easy, but it's a great industry. We meet a lot of great people all the time. So I've no doubt about the appeal about what we're doing.
Cool. All right. We've kind of maxed out our time, Charles, but it's always a pleasure. And I look forward to doing this again and seeing you in London. And next time, I'm not going to show you the questions because you're very polished.
But I wasn't seeing the question. What are you talking about? Cool. Thank you very much, James. It's always a pleasure and to work with you and with the Merchant Spring team.
Yeah, awesome. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Charles, just hit him up on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me and I can connect you.